Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're not just analyzing sources, we're taking a scalpel to the whole pursuit of perfection itself, and we're doing it through a set of these just blistering, highly personal essays. Our mission really is to extract the universal truths, the deep, undeniable patterns of human aspiration, of self-perception, and the truly unhinged mechanisms we use when we try to cope with the reality of being imperfect.
And these sources are just gold for that. Because they're not just memoirs, they are a study in this radical emotional contrast. You're dealing with a narrator who has these fierce, almost violently intense external ambitions.
Right.
And we're talking fame, success, a perfectly engineered body.
Yeah.
But internally, he's living in this state of absolute deep-seated neurosis.
Lots of chaos.
Yeah, and the tension between that polished external image and the internal chaos, the addiction issues, the rocky family background, that's where all the psychological insight really is.
Exactly. We're following one specific thread today, the thread of obsession and this constant pursuit of control. And it starts with an almost absurdly small incident, a childhood audition for a TV commercial, and it carries right through to adulthood where the need for control just becomes everything.
It really does.
And the most shocking part, which I think we have to unpack, is how that control often relies on what the narrator himself calls magical thinking, trying to force this messy, unpredictable universe into the precise shape he needs it to be.
It's so much more than just ambition. It's a psychological survival strategy. And if you, our listener, have ever felt that need to overly control a situation or to micromanage your appearance or even just to seek that quick external validation fix, this deep dive is going to give you the unvarnished, often hysterically grotesque truth that's hiding right beneath that polished surface.
Yeah.
We're basically watching him build and continuously fail to maintain this armor plate against reality.
Okay, so let's unpack the starting point then, the crucible, the infamous Tang commercial incident. We begin the story in Shutesbury, Massachusetts. And the sources describe it as a town so profoundly small, New England town, it felt less like a real place and more like a pristine little object.
Like a souvenir snow globe.
Exactly, like living inside a snow globe. And of course, that pristine, almost vulnerable environment made it the perfect, untouched target for the ultimate cynics.
Right, so into this wholesome little snow globe comes this white anonymous van carrying the men from Tang.
The men from Tang.
And the narrator, looking back, he immediately gets them. He sees them as these crass, hyper-capitalist, suit-wearing ad executives from New York City. You can just picture them, can't you? Smelling of expensive cologne, thinking,
I get the jackpot.
we hit pay dirt, gents. You couldn't build a set this perfect in Burbank, California.
But for the young narrator, these men who looked like they whispered things in President Nixon's ear and carried these important briefcases, they represented salvation. They were proof that the world outside his snow globe existed, and more importantly, they saw him. Because this kid didn't just passively watch TV, he lived for television commercials.
And that's such a crucial distinction, isn't it? He wasn't interested in the stories of the TV shows.
No.
He was fixated on the perfect, polished, aspirational jingles. The little 30-second stories, he's reciting slogans like, I told two friends, and they told two friends, and so on.
It's a pursuit of engineered perfection from the very start, which is exactly what advertising sells.
Exactly. And this is where we see the origins of what he calls his manic adult tendencies. The trauma really begins in the selection process, when the man with the penetrating blue eyes looks at him and says those three devastating words,
We want you.
we want you. And that phrase, it's just an instant manic emotional reversal. He goes from being an ordinary kid in a quaint town to someone special and better than all the other children.
And this isn't just a happy memory. The source directly connects this intense, immediate hit of external validation to the origins of his adult addictive behavior.
Yeah, that connection is the key psychological nugget here. That sudden high, that feeling of superiority, it immediately rewired his brain. He says he realized that day that he would require more than other people to feel normal or special.
Wow.
And that sudden, intense, maximal gratification, it served as a blueprint for all his future chemical highs, alcohol, crack cocaine, painkillers. They were all just routes to get back to that instantaneous maximal emotional peak.
But the high, of course, is very short-lived. He gets a scene. It's simple. He walks down a hallway and delivers his 6-word line, Hey, Mark, where are you going? And here is the profound misunderstanding. The narrator, who has lived this life observing the drama of advertising, tries to infuse the line with passion and interpretation and deep meaning.
He treats it like a scene from On the Waterfront.
Exactly.
Mm.
And the director, who just wants this bland, consumable image, he just screams, essentially, "Stop acting! What are you talking about, character? You're a kid in a school, playing a kid in a school."
Oh, that's brutal.
So the narrator feels himself just speeding out of control. He's over-rehearsed, he's overthought it, he's injected way too much of himself into the process, and the director finally just cuts and says, "Forget it. We'll fix it in the edit. This is a wrap."
The crushing blow.
Yeah.
And the devastating failure comes when the commercial finally airs. His line is cut completely.
Gone.
The commercial is totally hijacked by Mrs. Ames, his ancient cranky penmanship teacher, and Dip. Wendy, who he notes very bitterly, was chosen for her beauty and her glorious mental laziness. She knew how to just say 6 words neutrally.
So the moment of realization, he's mumbling, crushed in his room, is that the director didn't want passion. He didn't want interpretation.
No.
He wanted an ordinary kid who could say 6 words.
Okay.
And this trauma leads to this definitive, life-changing pivot to power. He realizes he has to stop being the vulnerable actor who can be rejected and cut.
Right. He has to become the one who thinks up the commercials, the one who hires and fires the director. He has to control the narrative from behind the safety of an armored desk.
It's a perfect defensive shift. If you can't master the external world through vulnerable performance, you master it through cynical control.
You trade emotional risk for systemic power. And that just sets the stage for his entire adulthood in the advertising industry.
Which brings us directly to the distilled cynicism of the products he was selling. And this is perfectly encapsulated by the fake butter substitute, Benken.
Oh, Benken is just a beautiful piece of dark humor. It's a drug manufacturer's invention, right? A chemical composite. But the agency's strategy is to present it as a miraculous breakthrough, accidentally discovered on a farm in Denmark.
It's a product whose success relies entirely on manufactured deception.
And the words they use are so revealing. They're trying to sell this synthetic purity. The slogans were things like, "So pure, it's odorless. Natural, because it's derived from trees."
Derived from trees.
Right, which, as the narrator points out with this wonderful dark wit, is a category that also includes things like rubber, cement, and napalm.
Oh, that's good. The agency understood that authenticity wasn't the point. What mattered was eliminating the undesirable traits, the odor, the visibility, and just replacing them with a vague positive association. Nature, Denmark.
But the agency didn't just want elegant lies. They wanted proven manipulation. And the source notes this cynical advertising shorthand they use for generating these predictable, highly effective ads. 2 C's in a K.
2 cunts in a kitchen. It's shocking language, but it perfectly illustrates the objectification of the target audience. Specifically, women in the domestic sphere.
And the formula demanded this very specific kind of presentation. A gourmet kitchen, an aspirational lifestyle, and a quick, easily digested promise of health or beauty.
And the script for this Benken ad, it followed the formula perfectly, even with just 1 C. It had the Academy Award nominee Amy Irving standing in that perfect gourmet kitchen, happily eating fried chicken and guaranteeing cholesterol reduction because she used Benken. This manufactured aspiration, designed specifically to manipulate the consumer's health anxieties. That's the core of his job, isn't it? Creating and managing the manufactured lie. But the absurdity, I think, reaches its peak with the story of the placeholder potato recipe, the one he was too busy to fix.
Right. He's rushing. The woman in charge of recipes is like living on a carefree houseboat in Sausalito or something.
Of course she is.
So he just writes this quick, temporary placeholder recipe for a potato ad to satisfy the magazine's deadline. And the recipe was beautifully simple. Just slice a potato, broil for 10 minutes, then sprinkle liberally with Parmesan or blue cheese.
A recipe that, if you just stop and think about it for even 2 seconds, would produce inedible slop.
Yet 10 minutes of broiling is not nearly enough time to cook a raw sliced potato.
And which naturally slipped through the cracks. Because the pace of the industry is so frenetic and the focus is so removed from actual reality, the recipe ran exactly as written in Red Book magazine.
And this is where his cynical pride just shines through. He wasn't horrified. He was triumphant.
He loved it.
He vividly imagines extremely busy moms in Tennessee, Ohio, and Wisconsin serving this great advertising to their unsuspecting guests. The result would be a rawish potato, gluey with melted cheese, just crunching into starches that would cause stomach cramps.
He saw it as a total victory of advertising over utility. The ad agency succeeded in selling the image of the product, the possibility of a perfect, easy dinner, regardless of whether the literal instructions delivered a toxic mess.
He reveled in it. He reveled in the fact that his work was so effective it could cause minor physical harm while convincing people they were participating in great cooking.
It's a fantastic metaphor for his entire life philosophy up to that point, prioritizing the external appearance of success and control, even if the internal reality is chaotic, damaging, and fundamentally raw.
That manufactured image in the advertising world leads us perfectly to the manufactured self, the narrator's lifelong obsession with radical physical transformation.
And this fixation on engineering his identity, it starts incredibly early. It comes from his childhood cubicle shrine dedicated to Christine Jorgensen.
Jorgensen, of course, was one of the first widely known figures to undergo male-to-female sexual reassignment surgery. And the narrator told his teacher, "If I could be anything in the world, I would be her."
It's less about gender identity, it seems, and more about the profound power of self-reinvention, the ultimate ability to decide who you are, surgically or chemically.
Totally. And that dormant desire for complete transformation is reawakened years later in San Francisco when he meets Amber, the receptionist.
Right. The source describes her as imposing, 6'4", with a receding hairline and a gigantic Adam's apple.
And here the narrator admits to this intense, clinical, and totally objectifying scrutiny. He wasn't seeing a person, he was seeing a puzzle of surgical results and financial limitations.
He stared at her crotch area specifically, noting that the fabric dented at the hole, and he concluded she probably couldn't afford a revision to smooth the transition.
Which is just a wild conclusion to jump to. But this external observation quickly spirals into a deep, intense research project. He spent hours, literal hours, scrutinizing these graphic photos of post-surgical vaginas, meticulously comparing the clitorises created by different doctors.
He learned all the terminology, the tracheal shave, revision surgeries, all in pursuit of this concept of passing, which he understood was the ultimate necessary form of external validation.
It's a terrifyingly academic approach to something so intensely personal. And by age 30, fueled by sheer boredom and the possibility of the ultimate control project, he seriously contemplates sexual reassignment surgery, SRS.
He details the specific, almost seductive appeal of the expensive self-lubricating vagioplasty.
The procedure was constructed from small intestine, which made it inherently self-lubricating. But the caveat is just brilliantly comedic and totally practical.
Because it was always self-lubricating.
Right. He realized he would require constant maxi pad use, even at funerals.
And that practical drawback starts to stack up against the obsessive fantasy. He's forced to confront the sheer logistics of this radical change. He wore a size 13 shoe, and he knew he'd need a surgeon willing to remove his toes to get him down to a size 10.
Which meant he might need a wheelchair. Plus, he'd need extremely expensive, high-quality Japanese hair wigs because Rogaine had failed him.
So the practicality ultimately conquers the neurotic fantasy. He decides it's just too much unnecessary trouble and way too painful, especially since he didn't actually feel dissatisfied with being a guy.
He was just intensely bored.
The high cost, the high risk, and the low practical return led to his alternative solution.
Which was a magnificent low-commitment pivot, abandoning the whole idea of SRS and instead buying a purebred Shiba Inu puppy named Becky.
It's a perfect illustration of his tendency toward maximal commitment to temporary ideas.
Absolutely. So from surgical transformation, we pivot to another route for external validation, modeling.
And this path began after his mother's friend Suzette, who clearly had this overinflated opinion of his looks, told him, "Jesus, just look at him, he's gorgeous," and then paid for his enrollment in Barbizon Modeling School.
And the modeling world reveals itself to be another highly specialized, segmented industry. It demands these hyper-specific physical attributes. He learns about the different specialties: catalog, runway, hand, crotch.
And the exotic floor model.
The floor model. Those specialized models who do well in a horizontal position, usually for like bedding or nightwear shoots. It's a world where every single inch of the body is commodified.
And his self-analysis becomes just ruthlessly hypercritical, almost debilitating. He studies his flaws under the microscope of the camera lens, worrying his eyes are too deep set, that his Roman nose, while nice, is slightly too long for the industry standard.
He also observes the instructors, which provides this fascinating layer of insight. People like Sharon, who he says had a horse face and huge hands. He realizes these instructors had once possessed these enormous ambitions, but their genetics had failed them, and they'd settled for teaching the next generation how to avoid their fate. They were walking cautionary tales.
The modeling school teaches him the art of controlling the image entirely, turning his body into armor. He learns to practice the different stages of the smile in front of the mirror.
Mhm.
And he applies dark mascara to his cheekbones for black and white photos to highlight his excellent bones, transforming his face into this high-contrast mask.
But again, the body he was born with, this awful ectomorph body, as he calls it just wasn't delivering the muscle mass required by the contemporary masculine standard.
So when the natural route failed,
He turned to the chemical route,
yeah,
heavy steroid doses.
and he had to rationalize this risk, of course. He convinced himself it was medical because a doctor was involved, a doctor he located through his friend who used cocaine and Xanax.
A reliable source.
Exactly. The rationale was, if a doctor is signing the script, it's a legitimate pathway to the perfect physique.
And the results were immediate, but they came with severe physical side effects. He developed gynecomastia, or tits. He started smelling perpetually of Stridex because of the severe, uncontrollable acne, and most dramatically, the onset of roid rage.
The description of the rage is so illuminating. It shows how the chemical alteration interacted with his latent need for control. We get the example of him feeling nearly homicidal fury directed not at a person, but at tiny imperfections in his apartment walls.
Right. He'd spot a tiny speck or a hairline crack in the plaster and just fly into this disproportionate shouting fit, concluding violently that Mies van der Rohe can kiss my ass.
The rage was directed at perceived flaws in his immediate environment, an inability to tolerate imperfection, which the steroids just amplified to this absurd degree.
It's like the chemical drive for external control was now manifesting as literal domestic terrorism against drywall.
He also provides this sharp, if cynical, sociological observation about steroid use among the gay men he knew. He noted it was the new goatee, a physical uniform for a specific type of transformation.
It was a way for men who felt they were, in his words, Nelly, femmy little sissies, or fat girl guys, as children, to chemically transgender into masculine men, to manufacture a strong, aggressive external self that matched their internal ambition.
And the risk acceptance tied to this is just staggering. He was fully aware of the heightened risk of prostate cancer associated with the heavy steroid regimen, yet he embraced it.
He concludes that if I was going to die of prostate cancer, at least I'd look hunky as they turn the ventilator off.
The desire for physical validation completely overrides basic survival instinct. It's the ultimate manifestation of the Tang commercial's lesson. The image is everything.
And the disconnect between that highly controlled, manicured external image, the perfect ad executive, the muscled model, and the internal reality of his life is where Section 3 really focuses. Because despite his high salary, his default mode was profound squalor.
He describes living in this tiny 300-square-foot studio apartment, but it was just organized chaos. He had a 4-foot-deep debris field piled throughout the space.
A debris.
Mounds of foreign magazines, old Chow Fun containers, and literally thousands of empty beer cans. This chaos, he explains, was ironically comforting. It was his default setting, his natural habitat.
And that squalor inevitably led to a traumatic confrontation that just shatters his sense of security. He wakes up to a bolt of distilled horror at the sight of a wrathing in his bathtub.
The creature had clearly found a way to bridge his inner world and the external plumbing system, and the epiphany he has in that moment is incredible.
What is it?
He realizes the bathroom faucet is nothing but a steel foyer for rodents to enter your home. His entire belief in the sanctity of his domestic space is just destroyed.
Panic sets in immediately. If the creature, which he later identified as a small white mouse, not a rat, escaped into his 4-foot-deep debris field,
He's done.
he felt he would have to abandon the apartment, possibly even leave the state entirely. The cleanup would be impossible.
So his first frantic attempt at extermination was pure manic reaction, emptying an entire can of Raid ant killer onto the creature.
But the raid only burned the mouse's corneas. It left it blind, but terrifyingly emboldened. It was now a blind, chemically toxic, fearless creature in his tub.
Wow. Unable to confront it directly, he chose a method of remote execution, locking the drain and turning on the hot water to drown it.
Oh, that's grim.
And the subsequent cleanup was meticulous, horrifying, and incredibly painful. He realized his $700 Armani glasses had slipped off his face and fallen into the infected, filthy water.
No.
So he had to discard them immediately. That tiny detail, the loss of the expensive external marker of success juxtaposed against the internal filth, it really drives home the chaos.
And the final act was pure trauma. He had to use a flattened paper towel tube while wearing rubber gloves to remove the heavy, wet creature from the drain. He could hear it make this sickeningly heavy, wet smack sound as it hit the bottom of the trash bag.
But the trauma wasn't over. He called a friend who dated a plumber, and the plumber delivered the most horrifying, life-altering warning. Vermin sometimes climb up through the plumbing and get trapped in the shower head.
Oh, that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
And this detail is the key to his next neurosis. The rat was gone, but the possibility was permanently lodged in his brain. The result: a life-altering fear of the shower.
So what does he do?
Only sponge baths with Evian. His quest for purity now required French bottled water to cleanse himself of the contamination brought by the outside world.
This internal chaos leads us back to his origin story, the Vanderbilt fantasy, which is his primary mechanism of control through radical displacement.
Right. He sincerely believed, for much of his childhood, that he was kidnapped and raised by common academic trash, his professor father and graduate student mother, who had no business with a person of his complexity.
He needed to believe his complex, dramatic, more-than-nature had a high-status origin. His true heritage, he concluded, was as a Vanderbilt. It was a form of protective, magical thinking.
His neuroses could only be justified if he were actually highborn.
And this fantasy is cemented when his family visits the Breakers Mansion in Newport, Rhode Island. He experiences an overpowering sixth sense of familiarity, like he belongs there.
And the tour guide provides the definitive proof. When the guide points out the solid gold faucet fixture in the bathroom, mentioning that it supplied hot and cold running seawater, the narrator just glares at his parents. He contrasts this unimaginable luxury with his own family's domestic reality, the tub grime left by his older grease monkey brother.
The gulf between hot and cold running seawater and tub grime from a grease monkey was simply too vast.
It was too much. He refused to leave the mansion, telling his father, "Don't call me that, I'm not your son."
The dramatic exit perfectly captures the forced rupture from reality. His parents had to literally drag him out, and the rubber soles of his cheap Kmart sneakers made this pronounced, high-pitched, screeching noise, a sort of sneaker scream, on the marble floor.
That sound, the Kmart screech on Vanderbilt marble, is the sound of his delusion being forcibly removed from its chosen habitat.
It's why the fantasy mattered so much. It wasn't just a childish game, it was a psychological need to believe his internal chaos stemmed from being displaced royalty, rather than just being the difficult child of academic parents.
His final experience with physical trauma, which successfully cured him of his elective surgical obsession, comes via what he calls his roof work, an issue with his mouth.
Okay.
This begins innocently enough with a bubble on his palate, which lingers for weeks. And what does a highly neurotic man with a predisposition for self-diagnosis do?
Oh, I'm scared to ask.
After 3 hours of intense internet research and most of a bottle of scotch, he decides it's a cyst that needs immediate surgical attention.
So he turns to self-surgery. He sterilizes a thumbtack, not just any thumbtack, but one from a friend's wedding picture, over a big lighter flame, and he plunges it into his mouth.
The instantaneous relief is followed the next morning by the opposite, a hole where the bubble used to be.
Oh, no.
This hole is eventually diagnosed by the oral surgeon, Dr. McCock, who, the narrator notes, is surrounded by these high piles of books, suggesting a deep, unassailable competence.
Right.
He diagnoses it as a congenital abnormality caused by his palate bones shifting, a latent cleft palate. The narrator is stunned. He thinks he came this close to living a life of deformity, and his self-surgery nearly exposed it.
And the surgical repair procedure is described in horrific detail.
Yeah.
And it is so clear why this became the ultimate deterrent against future elective transformation. It started with a foot-long needle for the local anesthetic.
Oh, God.
Then the use of an X-Acto knife, the sound of which he remembers vividly as sawing through styrofoam.
The sensory trauma was just relentless. He describes the unnatural and terrifying sensation of feeling the roof of his mouth lying across his tongue as the surgeon worked, followed by the intense pressure as the area was cleaned out.
And the aftermath was equally visceral. The palate was anchored to his front teeth with thick black stitches that looked like ropes around a dock. The visualization of the gore just played on a loop in his mind, cementing the horror of the body betrayed and the risk of voluntary self-mutilation.
And this experience served its purpose perfectly. He immediately decided, I am not ever going to get liposuction, a nose job, or pec implants. No elective surgery, ever.
The trauma successfully shocked him out of his lifelong quest for manufactured physical perfection. He also notes the very real risk of codeine addiction after the surgery, again linking physical pain directly to chemical coping mechanisms.
This journey through control and chaos naturally leads to his dating life, which was characterized by these extreme, often bizarre, transactional relationships that reflected his internal volatility.
He was perpetually drawn to characters who were outliers.
Take the Undertaker he dated. On the surface, the guy seemed normal. He wore Hawaiian shirts. He ran a side business selling Trixie the Christmas Pixie via small space ads in magazines.
Okay.
But his main job was truly macabre.
The Undertaker was shockingly casual about the grisly details of his profession.
Hmm.
We learn about him tying string around dead men's penises to prevent fluid leaks and stitching suicide victims' wrists shut before display.
The juxtaposition of the Hawaiian shirt entrepreneur and the grim professional is perfect.
But the attraction, for the narrator, was based on this form of morbid psychological control. He noted that the Undertaker had the whole mortality thing out of his system, which made him remarkably calm and present.
And he confessed that he hoped the Undertaker might pull some strings with death and protect him since they shared an office, a perfect piece of magical thinking applied to romance.
He also recounts multiple sexual encounters with Catholic priests. The first, Father Christopher, occurred when he was 14 in a men's room. After the encounter, the priest dissolved into sobbing, which profoundly impacted the narrator.
And the crucial detail is that the narrator felt terrible for the priest, not for himself. He saw him as a hunky young guy in the wrong career who was trapped by the external structure of the church. Again, his focus is on the external constraint, not the internal damage.
Then there was Father Bill in Chicago, a ruggedly handsome man who initially presented as a software developer, but was in fact an actual Catholic priest. They fooled around in a scummy alley behind a restaurant.
And what's fascinating is the transactional nature of that second encounter. While Father Bill gave one of the best blowjobs of the narrator's life, he also performed this critical, life-altering intervention immediately afterward. He sternly advised the narrator, "You should really go to rehab," and handed him a note for a celebrity rehab center in Minnesota.
The narrator completely dismissed the advice at the time, but he attributes his eventual recovery years later to finding that forgotten note. A life-saving intervention delivered by a highly unconventional source right after a sexual encounter in a dirty alley.
It's the ultimate example of salvation arriving in the most unexpected and unholy packaging.
If the Undertaker and the priest represented the search for mortality, control, and redemption, Debbie the cleaner represented the ultimate battle for domestic and psychological control.
Debbie was a formidable presence. She was startlingly short-level with the narrator's nipples, but possessed this compact pit bull build and a highly controlling personality. She arrived with an immediate, non-negotiable list of demands that instantly established her dominance.
The red flags were numerous and immediate. She required 12 boxes of Arm & Hammer baking soda because she was allergic to harsh chemicals and mixed her own cleaners.
And due to her contact dermatitis, she insisted on being provided with $300 cotton gloves from the fabulously expensive houseware store Gracious Home.
She weaponized her cleaning fees. She charged for every minute of her time, including the time it took to stop cleaning and go downstairs to buy olive oil for the floors. Extra virgin, naturally.
Then she charged an extra fee for the damage to my already bad knees caused by applying the oil, treating her body like a piece of high-cost specialized equipment.
But the conflict exploded when he dared to challenge her quality of work, specifically confronting her about only cleaning the bottom half of the mirrors and windows.
Her defense was manipulative genius. She immediately jumped into victimhood. "Are you criticizing me for being a short person?"
Oh, no.
The narrator notes that in his head, he immediately flashed onto court TV, knowing he had lost the argument the moment she deployed the short person defense.
That moment solidified her control. He surrendered, allowing her to win by using perceived victimhood against his perfectly reasonable request for a fully clean mirror. Her control escalated until she insisted he move to a larger apartment in the West Village.
A location he didn't even want, but she felt was appropriate for his status.
He felt kidnapped by her domestic tyranny, but signed the lease anyway. The final breaking point came when she demanded $900 extra cash for assembling and arranging the furniture in the new apartment. That was the moment he finally snapped.
The ensuing fight was an expletive-laden, dramatic firing match that was as lowbrow as it was cathartic. You cocksucking faggot versus ugly fucking midget.
Oh, wow.
The fight resulted in her immediate dismissal, but not the end of the transaction. Debbie, naturally, sued him in small claims court for the $900 fee, and he was ordered to pay.
And his revenge was magnificent and perfectly aligned with his love of dramatic, costly gestures. He delivered the $900 claim in 6 heavy paper sacks filled entirely with pennies.
A physical, literal weight of resentment, ending a high-drama, high-neurosis transactional relationship.
After years of this type of chaos-seeking fame, engineering his body, fighting mice, and battling house cleaners, stability finally arrived in the form of Dennis, a graphic designer who was, crucially, decidedly, not a lunatic.
And this is where we get the profound aha moment. After their first date, the narrator experienced this overwhelming, unexpected sense of peace. A supernaturally askew feeling, like balancing a china plate on his head without it moving.
And the key psychological shift. He immediately stopped his typical dating obsession and analysis. He didn't pulverize the evening. He didn't write out the flowcharts of possible disaster. He didn't overanalyze the conversation. He just went home and opened a book.
The neurotic need to control the outcome was finally dormant.
And Dennis, who was highly domesticated, cooking, ironing, and flossing with alarming regularity, triggered an interesting metamorphosis in the narrator. He began engaging in the domesticity he once sneered at. Washing dishes, buying a high-end iron, even reading Red Book cleaning tips. He found peace in the structured routine provided by someone else.
Yet the mania still lingers, especially in the face of unconditional love. He talks about the almost unbearable hurt of loving somebody, rooted in the possibility of losing that stable container of good.
Which leads to the wild mortality fantasies. The fear of loss manifests as an intense desire for Dennis to die first, simply so he wouldn't have to suffer the loss.
Or if the narrator had to die first, he planned to handpick and contractually obligate a replacement boyfriend for Dennis before his own death.
Complete with serious legal paperwork and consequences for breach of contract.
The control mechanism is still active, but now it's focused on protecting the stability he finally found, rather than achieving external validation. But ultimately, he finds genuine acceptance. Despite their differences, the narrator's ongoing neuroses and admission of occasional steroid use versus Dennis's aversion to change and predictability, he realizes this is unconditional love.
He sees himself as merged with Dennis, happily submitting to the container of good, and acknowledging that the life they share, even with its underlying neuroses, is as good as it seems. The decades-long exhausting battle against reality and imperfection is finally seated for connection.
So the journey through these sources shows us, clearly and darkly, that the frantic, extreme pursuit of external validation, whether it's fame in a Tang commercial, beauty through modeling and steroids, or wealth in the form of a Vanderbilt heritage, it's almost always a complex, costly coping mechanism for internal, familial chaos and deep-seated feelings of inadequacy.
And what we learn is that the extreme efforts to control the outside world, from killing the mouse and applying Evian sponge baths to engineering the perfect body and dictating the behavior of Debbie the cleaner, were spectacular failures. They only compounded the anxiety and the neurosis. The only thing that successfully deterred his drive for physical perfection was severe, non-elective physical trauma.
True freedom wasn't found in a perfect body or a perfectly clean apartment or a high-status name. It was found in the decision to stop what the narrator beautifully described as arm wrestling with the facts of his background, his neuroses, and his physical reality, and accepting unconditional love and stability.
The central liberating insight is that the narrator was able to find stability and peace while still admitting to ongoing neuroses and lingering issues. Perfection is not a prerequisite for connection. The true aha moment isn't gaining control, it's recognizing when the battle is hopeless and giving it up for genuine, messy human connection.
So if you are listening to this and feeling the pressure to control every outcome, to achieve the impossible image, the lesson is clear. You might be climbing a broken escalator.
Which brings us back to that one final provocative thought, recalling the narrator's childhood memory of the broken Kmart escalator. He noted that the downside always works. You can always slide down with ease. It's only going up that sometimes takes extra effort.
So is true life satisfaction found when we stop dedicating all our energy to climbing the broken escalator of perfection and ambition? A climb that is designed only to exhaust and disappoint us, and instead choose to find or build a stable, accepting home on the ground floor, within that container of good. Something worth mulling over as you look at your own imperfections and your aspirations this week.